This is not a UniFi camera. It's actually made by Hikvision. But the special part about this camera is that it's a bispectral camera, having both a visual or optical feed as well as a thermal feed. Ubiquiti currently doesn't have any thermal cameras. However, using the power of OnVIF and the third-party camera support, you can actually add a thermal camera into your UniFi Protect. So let me show you how to do that, because it looks kind of cool. Hey everyone, it's Ryan, your certified Ubiquiti trainer over at wifi-U, the largest provider of certified Ubiquiti training in North America. And in today's video, we are going to add a thermal camera to your UniFi Protect system. It's going to be lots of fun. UniFi currently doesn't have a thermal camera that they produce, so we are going to use one from Hikvision, a bispectral camera that we were able to pick up through our partner at ADI Global. Now, one thing I need to say, a whole bunch of people are probably going to jump in the comments and say, Hikvision, they're evil, they're terrible, blah, blah, blah. I am not a huge fan of Hikvision as a company. However, they happen to be clearing out a whole bunch of older Hikvision cameras, and they had this bispectral camera on sale. So I wanted to go ahead and put it in our test environment and actually see if we could bring in the thermal profiles and if they could work at all. And the answer is kinda. I'll talk about that here later in the video. But first, we should probably talk about what it means to be a thermal camera, because it's very different from infrared. So let's take a look at that. Now, to really understand the difference between thermal cameras and night vision using infrared, we need to understand where they sit at on the electromagnetic spectrum. So I've got the electromagnetic spectrum up here, and you can see it goes all the way down to super low frequencies, which have really big wavelengths. And then it goes up to really high frequencies like gamma waves that have very small wavelengths. Higher the frequency, smaller the wavelength, they are inversely proportional to each other. The visible light is kind of in the center there. We see a range of light that goes from what we see as red all the way to what we see as blue. If we go higher than blue, we get into ultraviolet light. If we go lower than red, we get into infrared light. Now, and our center is on green. Now, just below the red area of visible light is that infrared, and that's where we sit somewhere in the 700 to 1000 nanometers of wavelength. This is where our night vision cameras sit at. What they have is an IR illuminator, and a lot of times there's enough IR light as it is in the nighttime. Even though there's not a lot of visible light, there still tends to be a decent amount of IR light. And so our cameras can actually see in that range. Most cameras, to include Ubiquiti cameras, see in the 700 to 800-ish nanometer range, and they have IR illuminators in case it's really dark and there's not enough IR light, like it's a moonless night, for example. They have enough IR illumination from themselves to be able to see out up to, say, like 100-ish feet. However, some other manufacturers actually make IR that goes all the way down to 1000 nanometers, and that is actually not visible at all to the human eye. So when you look at a camera, you typically see those red glows, like in the corners of the camera. That's those IR LEDs that are lighting up. Well, some cameras that are specially designed for, say, military purposes or work in the prison, they'll actually not have illuminators that are visible to the human eye. So they sit about 1000 nanometers. They can still see in the dark, but you can't see the fact that they can see in the dark. Now, if we go further down the frequency, if we get lower in frequency, bigger in wavelength, we're going to hit the thermal area. That's where we're sitting at about 8,000 to 14,000 nanometers in wavelength. Thermal cameras are looking at the energy that comes off from a warm body. So they don't need an illuminator because the energy is coming on off. The only way that you're not going to emit thermal radiation is if you're dead and you're the same temperature as everything around you. Hopefully that's not the case, because then you'd be a zombie and that'd be terrible. So thermal cameras don't need illuminators. There's no thermal illuminator. In fact, that would actually make it worse. You wouldn't be able to see anything. Thermal cameras are looking for the differences in temperature because they're looking for thermal energy coming off. So what you're going to see is hot, right, for people in vehicles and animals and such, related to the cold of the environment around us. So they're very good at detecting hot objects. This makes thermal cameras really, really useful for picking up people on that are trying to hide. Also for being able to look for hotspots for areas where hotspots are really dangerous, such as a propane place, like a propane tank or propane pumping company, right? Or one of those liquefied natural gas terminals, right? If you imagine the danger of a ship that is full of liquefied natural gas exploding or catching on fire or anything like that, we don't want something like that, right? So thermal cameras are actually used in those cases. And again, they can see very precise levels of temperature because they don't, they're only looking at exactly what is irradiated from there. That also tends to make them, because they're very kind of niche, it tends to make them very expensive. That's why you don't typically see thermal cameras out on the marketplace, at least not yet, until technology kind of catches up and makes them a little bit cheaper. So that's where our different cameras are operating at. They're in the visible spectrum, they're in the IR spectrum, and then the specialty thermal cameras are in the thermal spectrum. All right, so let's go through some of the settings that you'd probably have to modify in order to make the thermal camera actually work, especially for a bispectral camera. So you can see on here on the screen, this is the actual camera login page. Unlike the UniFi cameras, where you can pretty much manage everything through the NVR, the Hikvision camera is actually designed to be logged into, and you can modify a lot of the settings inside of it there. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and log in. And you can see when you log on in, you kind of don't get anything. You're going to find that the interface for Hikvision, compared to the really nice UniFi Protect interface, the Hikvision interface is pretty garbage. So to actually see the cameras, you actually have to hit play when you first come on in. And then you can give it a second here, and you'll see the thermal camera. And you'll also see the visual camera. So you can see this is inside my office. This is looking at a window and the door. And you can see the difference, big difference there, right? The window is pretty much the same temperature as the stuff around it, but you can see the much more definition in the door because the door has heated up in different areas. It's at different temperatures. Especially you can see the outline of the door where the seal is at versus the actual door itself. So pretty cool. See a lot of differences right there. Now, I had to do a big firmware update for this camera. I had to download a 200 megabyte firmware upgrade for this camera when it came straight out of the box. So if you get this camera out of the box or a Hikvision camera out of the box in general, and the interface doesn't look like this, that's probably because you need to do a firmware update. And unlike in UniFi Protect, you actually have to go to Hikvision's website, find the firmware file for the camera, which is not too hard to do, download it, and then you actually go into the maintenance and security setting, click on upgrade, and then you actually select the file and upgrade it that way. It's kind of a pain. It's not very easy to do. Luckily, it's probably something you don't have to do once or twice. So there you go. Now, on the live view, right, you can see here, let me go play that live view again, that the optical sensor, camera number 1, right, is a much higher resolution than the thermal camera. And the problem is when you go to pull the camera into UniFi Protect, especially if you go to pair it with the AI port, as you're going to see later, the AI port is looking for the highest quality stream to go off of, and there's no way to select the stream that you're going to have. So what you need to do with a bispectral camera to get that thermal stream in the first place in Protect, you're going to have to actually go in and basically make the video stream for the optical one as low a resolution as possible, and then pump the resolution on the thermal one up in the hopes that the thermal will exceed the optical, and then you'll be able to gain, or you'll be able to see the thermal on the UniFi Protect. So let me show you how to do that. So I go in here to configuration, and then I go to video audio, and you can see here channel number 1, which is the optical stream. Okay. I'm going to select the mainstream. This is as low a resolution as I can get. And then you can see I've put it at 1 frame per second with a 32 kilobits per second bit rate. I've made the profile low. If you can select MJPEG instead of H.264, So I've done everything I can here to nerf this. And then if I go to substream, you can see I've selected MJPEG. Same thing, I've made it a very low resolution. That's for camera 1 because I don't have the option to turn camera 1 off. Hikvision doesn't give us that option. Maybe some other manufacturers do, but Hikvision certainly does not. If I go into camera 2, which is the thermal camera, and I go into the mainstream here, I have video stream, it's 1280 by 720, but I've made it 25 frames per second because that's the fastest it can go. I've bumped up the bit rate, I've bumped up the encoding, I've put it on the high profile, all that kind of stuff. And I have done the same thing here. I guess I can make it a same frame right here, hit save, and you'll see it saves up at the top. So I've put all of that in there because if you don't make the thermal really, really high and the optical really, really low, UniFi Protect is going to automatically pull the higher of the two streams, which will probably be the optical. That's one of the downsides, I think, with the bispectral camera. So now that we've done that and we've saved that, there's really not a lot more to do here except for some of the image manipulation. In my case, this is a turret style camera. When I initially set it on my table, it's upside down because it's actually designed to be mounted onto the ceiling. So what you can do is do an image adjustment. You can't do the image adjustment in UniFi Protect without adding it into with the AI port. And then when you do that, you actually lose, unfortunately, you lose the thermal because it tends to always go towards the visual. So what you can do here is under image, video adjustment, you can see here I've got up and down. And so I flipped it around. If you have none, it's going to be upside down. In this case, I had up, down, and it flipped it. So that way it appears right side up. Now, after you've set up your OnVIF camera, in this case, the Hikvision camera, we need to create an OnVIF profile. That's the actual username and login that you'll use to be able to add the camera. Every camera manufacturer has a different way of doing this, but for the most part, OnVIF profiles tend to involve logging into the camera, going into an advanced network setting, and creating a user. So you can see on here, we're going to go into this, which says platform access, and at the top it says OnVIF. We have it enabled, and then if we wanted to add a user, I'll just click add. This is where you'd put the username, the password, and then the type of user. I typically make the user's admins for the purpose of UniFi Protect. So that way there's no restrictions on the user accounts when they get added into UniFi Protect. Once that is done, then you go over to UniFi Protect and you enable the third-party camera detection. So let me show you how to do that. All right, once you have logged in to UniFi Protect, you will go down here to settings, and then you will go over here and you'll say discover third-party cameras, and you check that box. And as long as a third-party camera is broadcasting and it is OnVIF compliant, it is going to appear for adoption. And you can see here the Hikvision camera has in fact been adopted. What will happen is you will see this camera appear, you'll see adopt, you'll click on it, you'll use that OnVIF login and password. Don't use your admin login and password, it's not going to work for you. Use the OnVIF login and password, and then the camera will get added. Now, notice though, when you add the camera, not a whole lot you can do with it. In this case, you can have it always record, and that's really about it. If you want to do motion detections, if you want to do any sort of AI detections or things like that, you have to pair it with the AI port. All right, so you can see on the screen here, I've got two cameras on our test system. The first one is just a G5 bullet, and the second one is the Hikvision bispectral camera that we purchased. And lo and behold, you can see the thermal camera. You know it's a thermal camera because it says camera 2 on it. And if I was to open it up here, you can see, yep, this is the office door, and you can see all the thermal profile on it. So yes, the thermal piece of the bispectral camera will actually come through. So let's take a look and see how that camera looks. Now when I go onto, when I mouse over it here, you can see that it doesn't show the thermal. It shows camera 1, which is the visual camera. So let's see what happens when we go ahead and pair it, because we really can't do a whole lot with the camera except just sort of see it unless we have an AI port. So let's pair it with the AI port. Give it a second. It's connecting to it. And there we go. So now you can see I can do all the different things, except I don't have the ability to do a continuous recording because we don't have a drive in this particular setup that we have, but I can do events only. Taking a look here, looks like I got all my different options. You can see I can actually do license plate detection with it. How good it'll be, probably will leave something to be desired. But I've got all the right motion zones and everything like that. And yeah, everything seems to be working well there. Now, let's take a look though. So you see what happened here? So when we paired it with the AI port, it's going to pull what's automatically, it's going to pull the highest quality stream. And although I tried really, really hard to dial the stream down, the visual stream, the reality is that thermal cameras in general, the thermal portion is pretty low in terms of resolution. That's just a default. Your best thermal cameras are at best 1280 by 720, and that's a really expensive camera. We're talking a couple $1,000s for a camera with that. This camera was $365, so it does not have that great of a thermal sensor on it. So that's one of the issues if you go to bring a thermal camera into UniFi Protect, is that you're going to, if it's a bispectral camera, you're going to have a hard time being able to select the feeds. So you can see here, it's using the visual feed, and it's not, the AI port is no longer selecting that thermal feed. So now you're probably wondering, does a thermal camera actually work in UniFi Protect? And the answer is yes. I couldn't capture this using UniFi Protect with an actual recording, so I did a screen capture to show you what it looks like. You can see me here in my kitchen. I went ahead and took a pot of water and turned it to boil on my induction cooktop. That's why you can't see any flames. I also lit a candle, and there's a really, really hot wax warmer that's right next to my son. And so you can see here that the thermal camera is picking up thermal imagery just fine. It has all the outlines for the human beings in the room. You can actually see my son looks like he's wearing sunglasses, but he is not. His glasses actually are blocking the thermal light, so that's why they look like really dark sunglasses. And you can see that candle is heated up, and it has heated up the all of the glass around it as well as the wax. And you can now start to see the outline of the pot. It's becoming much more defined as that pot heats up from the induction cooktop. Also, you can see the two horizontal bars there. Those are the lights. The LED lights are actually a little bit warmer than the area around them. And now you can start to see the steam. So that steam, at first, it's almost the same temperature as its surroundings, but it's going to heat up pretty quickly there. It's actually going to look like that pot's on fire. Trust me, while I might not be the greatest of cooks, I am not, in fact, able to burn water. That would be for other people to do. That is just really, really hot steam coming off of it. Then my kids decide to have some fun, so they kind of like dance and jump across and such, right? As kids are wont to do. But you can see that, yeah, this thermal camera, really good at catching those temperatures. Very, very good and useful for seeing where there is activity. All right, now remember when I said, hey, thermal cameras can see in complete darkness, whereas night vision cameras have to have an IR illuminator? Well, let's go ahead and demonstrate that. So I have both a G5 bullet and the Hikvision thermal camera in a completely black room, or for the most part, pretty black. And you can see the G5 bullet on the left side here has a really, really good image. It's got some really good IR, even with a couple of little IR illuminators on there. And it's a pretty decent night vision image. And the thermal camera looks just like a thermal camera. However, let's go ahead and in the G5 bullet, we're going to turn off the night vision. So we've just turned off all of the IR illuminators, and let's take a look at what that looks like. Oh my, you really don't see anything. You see a little bit of dim on the right-hand side of the image, and that's because there's some residual light from the rack that we have downstairs in this room. But otherwise, you can't see anything. So in complete pitch blackness, you won't be able to see anything with with an IR camera. There has to actually be IR light to be able to see that. But you can see the thermal camera didn't even change at all. It's good because, again, all the objects in the thermal camera are actually emitting the frequencies, right? They're actually emitting that energy at the frequency that your thermal camera's sensor is actually able to read. So the only way for them to not be able to be picked up by the thermal camera is to not emit that energy. So in this case, right, if something is alive and it is warmer than the area around it, it's going to pop up even in complete darkness. It will also pop up when there's rain and fog and snow and all that other kind of stuff because, again, the rain and fog and snow don't emit any IR. They don't emit any thermal energy. They're very cold. So the thermal sensor is just not going to see anything for that, and it's only going to be looking for warm objects. So this gives you a really good way of looking at things when it's completely pitch black out. Can you use a thermal camera in UniFi Protect? The answer is yes. Should you use a bispectral camera in UniFi Protect? The answer is maybe. What I found was that the bispectral camera, no matter how hard I tried to use the AI port to add motion and AI detections to just the thermal feed, I was not able to get the AI port to pick up just the thermal feed and not use the video feed. Unfortunately, the AI port is going to default and pick up what it considers the highest quality feed. And because the video feed, in my case, was always going to look higher than the thermal feed, I wasn't able to do AI detections or motion detections off of it. If I had a thermal only camera that just had a thermal profile and nothing else, you probably could pair it with the AI port and you could do AI detections as well as motion detections. Also, I saw no reason that the thermal camera couldn't be used in your alarm manager, which is where I think this makes it a very powerful addition to a UniFi Protect install. If you have a thermal camera that's doing a wide area surveillance and it notices a hot spot in some particular area, it can cue a PTZ camera to look over at that particular position. That is very, very powerful for large area surveillance. It's also really powerful if you're looking for, say, coyotes or you're looking for raccoons or something like that, where the actual visual cameras might struggle to pick those objects out from all of the other surroundings. So you can absolutely bring thermal cameras in. The bispectral camera that we used, it was fun to bring out the thermal profile. And as you saw in the video, it actually works and you can see the stuff. Unfortunately, with the bispectral, it's really only useful as a overall surveillance for, say, guard to be looking at, but it's not going to really do you any good on the recording side. So overall, yes, you can bring in thermal cameras. Hopefully, in the future, UniFi Protect will change the AI port and allow us to actually be able to select the different camera feeds. It would also be useful if the bispectral camera manufacturers would allow us to turn off the video, the optical setting, so we just had a thermal feed coming in. I looked all over the place in the Hikvision firmware and settings, and I wasn't able to find a way to just turn the optical feed off. So that's it. You can definitely bring thermal cameras in, and I hope in the future we'll see some more thermal camera manufacturers make less and less expensive cameras so that we can have more people actually bringing those into their installations. If you like this video and you want to learn more about UniFi Protect, please go check out our class offerings at learn.wifi-u.com. That's where we have all of our new virtual classes as well as access to some of our in-person classes. For UniFi Protect in particular, we have a Video Security Essentials or VSE class, and we're going to be offering it both in person as well as virtual instructor-led training, where you won't just have to watch a whole bunch of pre-recorded videos, you'll actually have an instructor there to walk you through and answer your questions. It helps you really get off the ground with UniFi Protect, and it really helps you make your installations shine for your customers or for your home. So check us out at learn.wifi-u.com, and I hope to see you in class.